Hello, and welcome to an adventure like no other. Far more than what you have known, there is something far more to be known than you can ever know. And it is all about you, the real you, your real awareness with your intuitive senses. You were never taught that the real you, your real awareness, is operating 5 bodies in cause and effect, restricting creation. You have been taught to think that you are only a one-dimensional human person, with a mind and emotions, and with a very short lifespan on this planet Earth. More than what your mind can grasp is your intuitive senses that can be opened to see beyond all your restrictions. You have always had an opening to see beyond what you have known, and this has been purposely kept from you, and this is where you have heard rumors and stories about your nightly dreams. Your so-called dreams is your opening to your intuitive senses that will allow you, the personal you, to excel beyond what you have previously known. Everyone has intuitive senses, and very few people take advantage of what is possible by recognizing something more than their mind can understand. Creation has its place for all of us, and then there is all life, which is far more than anything than what can become with creation. Everything we experience is necessary for us to survive with whatever we choose and decide our life to be. New Kevin Smith is the great witness to something more than what can be taught and learned in any school. It can be so that when anyone first listens to Kevin's intuitive side experiences, also known as real side experiences, from what their personal mind has known, Kevin's manner of expression will at first be rather different to comprehend. This is where this introduction and reading the new books and Facebook groups will help. Have fun deciding. DUANE the Great Writer and Seer.
In this real side experience, I would find myself within the recreated house of my deceased and transitioned from the physical level grandfather. I have shared on countless previous real side experiences that generally the real guides will present themselves in the simulated forms of my grandparents, my grandfather especially, who would have been my mother's father on the physical. It is relatively standard that the guides will operate in the forms of older parental figures and siblings, as many new friends over the years have shared and can testify to. Each individual is unique, and the guides will cater to them in regards to the creational process they are putting the individual through accordingly, and for me, as I mentioned, it seems the form of my grandfather is the preferred option as assumed by the guides in my experiences. And as the real awareness that we each actually are is a part of the isness everything that animates then through all consciousness, as it effects into all form and feature that it does, the ideas of all consciousness that become a simulation and manifest are available to the real awareness therefore for perusal, and the ideas then that underlie and are the foundation of what is presented on the simulated front can be determined, any deception can be discerned. We can be apprised then via real awareness impressions that those operating in our presence are the genuine individuals, the parents, siblings, etc., or if they are indeed real guides assuming such forms, or perhaps dark force reptilian shapeshifters with intentions to deceive. That although the guides will be operating then on the simulated side, through creational mechanics and body forms, their true essence, that of their real awareness, in recognition of the all is, it is a part of, this recognition expresses as a unique signature the real awareness also can discern, and which can't be faked, You either recognize the ears or you do not. Not only will the guides frequently animate through the outer form of my grandfather, but the very physical level house of my grandfather is often recreated on the real side and utilized as a place where engaging with the guides and DUANE occurs as an established position of a meeting. This would be the case in this real side experience, and although no guide was present, the recreated grandfather's house was to be utilized for the launching seemingly of another real side project on this occasion. Additionally present would be an individual that has been a physical level associate in this lifetime, and also in lifetimes previously, as has been revealed to me, some of which I have shared, and again I will not be using his actual name, but will refer to him as I have previously as Troy. That although he gives a little indication of interest in regards to the real purpose of his recognition on the physical, the real side is a somewhat different, where he has a demonstrated interest and intent with the all-ears, though it tends to fluctuate and is far from cemented. He has participated in a number of awareness beneficial assignments as an example, and seems he was set to do so again here. I have shared on previous real side experiences that just as it is on the Earth physical level, operating real side and multi-dimensionally are extensive mafia-like organizations, they would be generally Dark Force affiliated and oftentimes be assigned the primary function of agreement maintenance, as through the induction of fear, intimidation, and the threat of violence and abuse, so they are a tool to ensure acquiescence of the simulator multitudes with the Dark Force controllers, agreement that is essential that the control systems of the simulator are perpetuated, as everything occurring creationally is based on the agreement ideas that effect manifest it. As I would encounter these mafia-like enforcer organizations on the real side, I would have various objectives in relation to them. Sometimes within their ranks would be particular individuals I was to engage with. Other times I would be gathering certain intel, and with all the variations of assignment, the best means of their execution was to infiltrate these mafia groups, as opposed to directly confronting them and where hostilities would be expected. The real awareness will afford all that is required that such infiltration can be successful, that my becoming a part of the mafia groups can be so without risk of exposure or discovery as to my deception. This would be the case here, and although it wouldn't be revealed as to my purpose for the infiltrating of this particular mafia group, as there do seem to be innumerable multi-dimensional Dark Force mafia organizations in operation, it was as though I had been successfully accepted, and indeed Troy had been instrumental in facilitating this. As I mentioned, Troy and myself have been in association for many lifetimes. Most of my previous lifetimes have not been especially admirable, as I have shared, in how I have conducted myself, and the Dark Force company I tended be in affiliation with, and Troy would be one such individual then who operated in similar circles. As I said, his intent fluctuates between his personal self-consciousness embracing and the all-ears on the real side, where generally on the real side he presents as reptilian in body form, and just like myself, through his past lifetime associations, so he has extensive dark force connections, which present as windows of opportunity which facilitate the ease by which certain assignments can be launched. In this case, with his connections in regards to this particular mafia-like group, as he seemed to be currently part of their organisation, so he had enabled the means by which my infiltration could be so. He was aware that my purpose was not to become as part of the mafia group, that it was a deceptive ruse to carry out a particular objective that could be executed with greater ease if accepted among their number, but he was willing to go along with it at risk to himself, operating as a kind of double agent, you might say. Oftentimes we will provide others the opportunity to assist with our assignments, even though we perhaps could have done so without aid, just as a means by which individuals like Troy have opportunities where they can step up, which will benefit their real awareness accordingly, as everything equals itself. We become, in recognition of the all-ears, in reflective accord with the extent that we support all life, through our actions and deeds that are awareness beneficial. My grandfather's house, usually utilised as a meeting place with the guides, as I said, had on this occasion been the location where the finalising of my acceptance into the mafia group had been determined, where present with the Troy and myself had also been a representative of the mafia group, as he had evaluated my suitability and concluded that I was a viable addition to their organisation. The mafia character would appear to depart the house as though to deliver his evaluation to his superiors. In the meantime, Troy and I would be discussing the particulars of my infiltration, deliberating over plans and schemes that my assignment be successful. Unbeknownst to either of us, the mafia representative hadn't exited the building. He had been hiding in an adjacent room for the purposes of eavesdropping, and had heard all that Troy and I had discussed, and no impressions had been afforded revealing the fact that the mafia individual was still present. He would burst into the living room where Troy and I had remained. I had been exposed, and the assignment now would be abandoned, my position within the mafia group forfeited. Not simply a case of all involved going their separate ways, for these dark force mafia groups have a certain code they adhere to, that anyone leaving their organisations will meet the penalty of death, and this would be the fate as bestowed upon me by the mafia representative. It seemed Troy would not be executed, for he hadn't revealed his want to leave the organisation. He had aided and abetted an infiltrator, and perhaps would be punished for such, but maybe he could present a plausible case of deniability, and I certainly wouldn't desire to endanger Troy any further, and likely back up whatever argument Troy would present in his defence. I had the impression I wasn't in any danger. I had no agreement held to in relation to these mafia characters that allowed their ability to harm me or dictate my simulated experience. For everything we experience is according to what we decide. The ideas we have installed in consciousness and maintain agreement with, and should I lack the idea agreements that another can harm me, then despite their best efforts, they will be unsuccessful. And although then I was in no peril, I would instead elect to proceed with this unfolding situation, to play along, if you will, to see where it may lead. For if creational experiences are the references by which we can determine recognition of the all-is, through the comparison that they provide, then it stands to reason that we endeavour to accumulate as many viewpoint reference comparisons as we can, to go along with experiences even when we have no agreement requirement to do so. And additionally, every experience is opportunity to engage and encounter more individuals and body types that we would not have had we severed the experience at that point. And I had the sense that to proceed would in some way or other be ultimately beneficial. I would be escorted now from my grandfather's house to the mafia headquarters. Troy and I were bundled into separate black and very expensive-looking cars. We wouldn't go directly to their base of operations, but instead stop off briefly at a halfway position, as though the journey was rather lengthy, and necessary was it to remain for the night in this alternative building. I was under constant scrutiny and guard throughout, but at one point the building, and indeed all its occupants, were suddenly under fire. Snipers had established themselves around the building's perimeter, and intended to assassinate all that dwelt within. No impressions would reveal who these assassins were, perhaps a rival mafia gang, for although the dark forces generally have the same overall objective, that of control, dispute and altercation among their ranks and groups isn't uncommon. We are dealing with very aggressively inclined and abusively driven personal self-immersed beings after all. The snipers would be successful in dispatching approximately half of the mafia individuals that were present. The group had totalled in number a dozen or so. I would be unharmed, however, and with the mafia group, or those that remained, at a distinct disadvantage. They would exit the building through the back door, dragging me along with them, ducking and evading the hail of bullets, and depart the scene in their black cars. No chase would ensue, and we eventually would reach the headquarters of the mafia organisation. I would now find myself in a large warehouse-style area of the building, sat in a chair, surrounded by 20 or so mafia characters, sporting an assortment of firearms, and the head of the organisation standing before me, and delivering my execution verdict. As I mentioned, I had allowed this experience to unfold, but I did lack agreements in relation to these characters that allowed them to in any way harm or eliminate me, for absent of the idea and the effect can't follow, and what ensued was quite the skirmish, for they would attempt my elimination but be unable, as I was the recipient of their combined fire, and I would proceed to systematically wrest a weapon from each mafia individual in turn, execute them with it, and use the weapon to return fire upon my other assailants. Every time my gun was exhausted of ammunition, I would acquire a new firearm in this same manner. A number of bullets would strike me, but have no effect whatsoever, to the bewilderment of my assailants, and ultimately every mafia individual present was laying dead on the ground. There was no sign of the mafia boss, as though he had beat a hasty retreat in light of the situation. Self-preservation outweighing any loyalties he had to his organization and well-being of his lackeys. On the real side, as bullets or any projectile tend to represent ideas, clearly the ideas I was firing had been received. The ideas the mafia goons were blasting at me had not, despite a few of them impacting my body form. And now I would find myself in my recreated physical level house, which on the real side represents the consciousness. All that we find present within the consciousness as idea agreements, including the ideas that are the consciousness-affected body types of others, will be present within our recreated houses therefore. Engaging with others is a contract of agreement, for I cannot experience the body forms of others in my midst, absent of agreement to the ideas, the consciousness that generates them, and until I consciously severed agreement then with the mafia organization, they could potentially always feature in my experience. For indeed, the specific mafia characters I had dispatched, as they had attempted to eliminate me, would now all be present in my consciousness representing house, but only through impressions via the real awareness could this be determined, as they were operating in forms so at odds from those they had been previously, that the personal self alone, and absent of impressions as to their identities beyond the simulated surface front, wouldn't have realized this was the case. For instead of the humans that they were, wearing the expensive suited attire they each had adorned, they now were as an assortment of twisted, monstrous body types. And perhaps I was simply viewing these characters as they actually were, that their human forms were an outer guise, and these distorted body forms were the true reflection of their equally as distorted dark force consciousnesses. For we always are the reflection of ourselves, our actions, deeds, and life choices in regards to our creational positioning and body types. These mafia characters then, in their actual forms, most of which are bordering on indescribable, would be irate at my dispatching of them previously, my defiance of their organization, and denying them their elimination of me, and would attempt to assail me once again. That although agreement allowed their presence in my experience, within my consciousness representing house, this still didn't extend to their ability where my destruction at their hands was concerned. And once again, despite their best efforts, as they assaulted me with a claw, fang, and a tentacle, they were unsuccessful, and I would put down their attempt and nullify them. I mentioned earlier of my sense to proceed with this experience, as though there was opportunity and benefit in doing so. For as the mafia characters, in their distorted monstrous forms, were bested, their rage and intent to harm me abated. They became more curious as to my invulnerability. I have shared on a previous real side experiences that through the abilities as made available via the real awareness on the real side, and through our becoming increasingly indomitable as we relinquish agreement with all ideas of consciousness, which render us progressively untouchable from all others throughout multi-dimensional creation, such immunity becomes noticed, and what were previously our assailants, on realizing they can't harm us, are curious as to the source of our indestructibility. This then becomes the opportunity to reveal this source, the real awareness that we, our prior assailants, and all body forms are animated by, and the process of awareness, which entails the releasing of all idea restrictions, and occasionally these beings will elect to try this awareness process for themselves as a consequence. This would seem to be the case here. The mafia individuals, in their distorted monstrous forms, fascinated by my indomitable body form, would be apprised of the source of my ability, and at that moment, at least, as intent can fluctuate, they would set their respective intents now with the all ears. As they decided this, their forms would alter from the monstrous designs they currently were to those of human again, but a more vibrant form of human that they had been previously, as though made more radiant through their intent set now with the true reality. And this then was the reason as to why I proceeded with this experience, and allowed the mafia to take me to their headquarters, where I was to be executed, as ultimately I was then able to bring a number of their organisation around to what we are presenting, the opportunity of recognising their real awareness and real purpose, that of is recognition. And perhaps this was in actuality the assignment I intended. For as I mentioned in the beginning, I would never have revealed to me the objective behind my mafia infiltration, and may have assumed that through my exposure that I had then failed. The scene would fade, and I would find myself in a new structure, in the company of a large number of individuals. That impressions revealed were those on their respective processes of awareness. Present also was a being that was orchestrating affairs, and impressions further suggested he was a real guide. For everyone in attendance were those embarking on the various life and awareness benefiting assignments, and our activities were laid out across a vast table in the middle of the building, on as though a graphic depicting the particulars of each of our operations. Displayed would be that which we would be dealing with, the dimensions and environments we would be frequenting, the various body types we would be engaging with, those assisting, those opposing our objectives, etc. And as each aware being present accepted their assignment, so they would move a mobile piece on the assignment progression board that represented themselves to the appropriate position where their operation would begin, and would be then their next real side experience effectively. I was reminded a little of the movie Clash of the Titans, where all the happenings of the earth and the humans involved were as clay pieces being positioned according to what they decided, as watched over by Zeus and the gods, etc., and where the gods would elect to intervene as they chose. In this case, more a representation of the real awareness view and position of each individual present, aside from creation, and where the choices and agreements presented as the movements of the pieces, the animated body forms, operating as they do on assignment in the simulated environments that they then would find themselves within. The real guide would speak to how I had graduated into this new group, those present in the building I now was in, and that the task I had undertaken involving my mafia dealings that I had previously shared was quite impacting on my personal self, and if illusory time were to be applied, even though the experience was completed within one night, it would have been for the duration of approximately 5 days. Apparently, the assignment had facilitated my assumption of this new position with life, and with these others currently occupying it. For as we present and operate in ways that benefit awareness, as everything equals itself, so this reflective principle equates to our greater awareness and positioning with the true reality. The guide would state how the mafia assignment had been quite the grueling task to undertake. Perhaps it was more effect impacting than I currently realized, as I hadn't felt it was as taxing as the guide had suggested. Nevertheless, I would approach the assignment progression table and determine where on the board the piece representing my simulation inserted form resided, just as the others present were moving their pieces into positions which would herald their own next multi-dimensional operations. It seemed there was much by way of a preparation prior to the movement of each individual's respective piece to the position on the board where the assignment would then commence, in a way that I can't easily and literally convey, along the lines of coordinating the ideas in association with it, that the operation go smoothly, as though refining the data that underlies the computer game we intend to play, that our gaming experience be as agreeable as possible. I would notice that one of my potential assignments, as yet to be experienced, involved a situation where antagonistic confrontation from distorted reptilian snake-like body forms would be inevitable. My idea coordinating or refining in regards to this resulted in the snake beings becoming my allies as opposed to my adversaries, and where they then would assist me with further assignments down the road. For where the snake beings had stood as though in defiance of my progress on the board, they now were positioned that they would accompany my playing piece, and indeed aid it in the delivery of its objectives further along the board, as though I had engaged with the snake beings prior to my encounters with them, had gleaned their agreement that they assist as opposed to interfere and disrupt. The ideas that were the underlying foundation of my relationship in association with them now altered, and the alternative effect outcome made manifest, that of their assistance instead of antagonistic opposition. And there the experience would end, as I said, ultimately an operation born of opportunity as made possible by proceeding with an experience, that of the gleaning of the attention and the subsequent stepping up of an assortment of former Dark Force affiliated characters, and made apparent also that everything already is completed in this reality terms, our assignments included, and we are simply going through the simulated movie of what we have already decided and set our intent for, as the objective view that was the final scene would reveal.